Individualism wasn't an idea that I believed in when I was younger. It was a strategy that I used to survive. Personally, I didn't have a super tight-knit family when I was growing up, and after high school, pretty much all my closest friends up and left almost overnight. They joined the military, moved away, and just started lives that I wasn't a part of any longer. So suddenly and without warning, I was on my own and without a safety net, feeling the full weight of responsibility that I now had over the success or failure of my own life. But individualism made that feel acceptable, even empowering. It told me, you're still capable, you can figure this out, and you don't need anyone to do so. And for a while that was true. But it also reinforced something that was already kind of there, which was this learned distrust that I had developed for other people. When someone offered help, or a gift, or kindness, I didn't always experience it as generosity. I experienced it as leverage, something to be called upon later, something to be used. So independence didn't just mean capability, it meant defense. And from that defensive posture, the whole world looks a little different. Grace starts to look naive, trust looks irresponsible, and letting people in feels like a mistake you'll eventually pay for. And when needing help is framed as weakness, refusing it starts to feel like a strength. But it isn't. It's just a different kind of weakness. Because eventually things will fall apart. They always do. One particular moment that comes to mind was me in a hospital room, staring at my phone, realizing that there was no one I could text, and no one was coming to visit me. My closest friends existed somewhere in the past, but at this particular moment, all I had were acquaintances and coworkers. And I had realized that self-reliance works best right up until the moment you need another person. And suddenly all that independent strength felt embarrassing, even shameful. And what's complicated is I'm not trying to throw independence away. There is something valuable there. I just don't think it needs to exist at the exclusion of relationships and community. But I've been grateful for the way that it's helped to keep me calm in moments where things do fall apart, for the ability to solve problems alone, and for not freezing when there's no one around to step in and help me out. But that same orientation made it hard to belong anywhere. I had the freedom to move through the world easily. It was no problem for me to change jobs or leave relationships, or just flow from place to place without too much friction. No one depended on me, and I didn't depend on anyone either. And that freedom felt clean, but it also made life just smaller. And I've started noticing this pattern kind of everywhere. As I make my way through the world each day, I look around and I notice that the infrastructure for community is everywhere. We live in a world where the infrastructure of community still exists, but the behavior doesn't. I see these public spaces built for gatherings that are just empty. Apartment complexes advertise connection through shared spaces that no one ever uses. And neighbors live side by side for years without ever speaking. And technology makes it easier than it's ever been to meet our needs without involving another person at all. Groceries arrive at our door, problems are solved by machines, and even a social itch can get scratched without the social risk. And slowly, almost politely, we just stop needing each other. I've noticed another version of this too, where some people's lives are so carefully optimized that there just isn't room left for relationship. Diet, fitness, work, routines, all dialed in, not because they're shallow, but because order feels safer than dependence. And in that kind of life, a relationship doesn't look like nourishment, it looks like a liability. Something unpredictable that might derail the system. And that too is a kind of loneliness that passes as strength. When the people we surround ourselves with are all strangers to us, all we have are assumptions. And it's never been easier to make negative ones. It can be something as simple as the wrong tone of voice, a bumper sticker, a look, an article of clothing, or just the wrong kind of effort. And then whole identities get collapsed into singular moments. And where there's no familiarity, mistrust fills in the gap. And that mistrust doesn't just make us feel lonely, it makes certain problems feel completely impossible. Because alone, everything can start to feel a little too heavy. But shared across people, even the hardest parts of life start to feel manageable. What worries me is how hard this is to reverse. How hard it is to rebuild trust once we've trained ourselves to survive without it. Our world, optimized for the individual, keeps pushing trust lower and lower down the list of priorities. I don't know if we'll ever return to what community used to look like. Maybe that version's gone. Maybe we'll have to build something new. But for now, we're stuck in transition. And a society full of capable individuals can still collapse when none of them trust each other. The infrastructure of community still exists, but the behavioral permission doesn't. And what's strange is, I know this isn't inevitable. I've also felt something different. I've been welcomed into homes by people who barely knew me, and offered food without asking, and a chair without explanation. A sense that my presence wasn't a burden that needed justification. What struck me wasn't the generosity, but the assumption behind it. That trust wasn't something you earned later, it was a starting point. And I can't help wondering how much smaller our lives become when trust has to be proven before it's permitted. There are still plenty of places to gather, but permission is something we've all quietly stopped giving. And the slow erosion of trust between people might be one of the most concerning problems of our time.